My name is Fawad Siddiqui, and I am an actor, journalist, aspiring writer from Miami, Florida, and the United States. And I'm also, I feel, one of, if not the world's foremost authority on the appearance of Muslim characters in comic books. Although I've got some competition now from Australia, unexpectedly. But yeah, for years I thought I was actually the only weirdo out there doing this. So I was actually very happy to discover there's another one. But so I've been collecting comics since I was about 11 years old, and I have worked at a few comic book shops eventually over my life. So during college, I was working at the oldest comic book shop here in Miami near the college, and one day I came across this is somewhere between 1998 and 2002. I came across the appearance of a Muslim character. So, your typical stereotypical Muslim character, probably a genie or a turban involved, a magic sash, maybe a scimitar, maybe a belly dancer, a hijab, a crude drawing, like a veil, as they would call it, something. So I saw something, or maybe a military dictator in like fatigues with olive skin and a little black mustache and a beret. Which, by the way, if he has a palm tree in the background, then he's South American. If there's no palm tree, then he's Middle Eastern. That's how you know the difference between the dictators. So I saw one of these. I was like, I wonder how many of these there's ever been. And that shop had a great back issue selection. So I started going. Then I was help organizing that back issue section. So I started going through and looking for any appearance of just that, of a turban, genie pants, bearded Arab-looking people. And I started finding them. And it kept growing and growing and growing over time. The shop, my friends who own the shop knew this. They would, like, if something came in, they'd say, "Wow, there's a Muzzy in this one." Muzzy Comics, that's what they say. So yeah, I started finding them, and then 9/11 happened near the end of my college experience. And I was studying journalism. I was studying print journalism, writing, creative writing. So my thought was, and has continued to be, to write a book on the subject or do something, website. And then 9/11 happened. And I grew up in a family very involved in Muslim community activism. My parents were the first, if not one of the first, Muslim couples and Pakistani couples in South Florida. Having come my dad came in 1971 to the area, and my mom shortly thereafter in 71, 72. And I'm one of 5 siblings here. My dad founded an engineering company. It was concrete and soil testing, and now I help run that company many years later. After trying successfully avoiding it for most of my life, eventually it got me. But managed to shift from journalism career that petered out into acting. I stumbled into acting after college, a few years after. Because, 9/11 happened, and I'd gone into studying journalism largely because growing up in the Muslim community and the activist work and in the youth group, so my parents were involved in the originally it was called the MSA, and then it became the Islamic Society of North America, ISNA. And ICNA was an offshoot of that, Islamic Circle of North America, and many other offshoots. These are the days of the late 70s, 80s, and 90s of bustling growth of the Muslim American community in America and the development of the quote-unquote American Muslim or Muslim American identity, which has been an interesting development as a community. After the civil rights legislation of the late 60s suddenly opened and allowed colored people, as we were, to have rights and to live and work in America more freely, thanks to the work of Black people and the Black community. You had also the Cold War going on. So America was courting and inviting people from the Muslim world, from the third world, as they would say, from Asia, from Africa, and the Middle East and Southeast Asia, to come And so my parents were part of that wave. Very first wave was graduate students, and then after that was like graduate level people. So my dad had his master's already in chemistry, and he came and he started doing this concrete testing work. Arrived in New York City in an apartment with 6 other guys. Answered a one ad in Naples, Florida, on the west coast of Florida. Doing that same, he'd worked on a road project in Pakistan, doing this density testing. I think there was an American contract run or something, and either he got a sponsorship from that person or it was the lottery system that used to go on, and he was able to come. He was the second son, you know, the more adventurous one of the family. So he came out, and these are like cowboys. These guys, you know, that generation of Pakistani guys, just coming out here with nothing, don't know. They knew English because we've been colonized by the British for 150 years, Indian subcontinent, but didn't know this place. And they came out and they loved it. And then, you know, sent a letter back saying, I want to get married. So he got arranged marriage to my mom through his older brother and my mom's cousin. So they were a love marriage. So this was like, but they had known each other within the larger family for a while. And so growing up, so my mom came over. She had the same adventurous spirit, wonderful marriage, beautiful, wonderful life together, American dream stuff for 30 years together. Alhamdulillah, mashallah. They both since passed away, alhamdulillah. But so we grew up in a very idyllic, I used to call it like Pakistani Ozzie and Harriet kind of situation, every summer we'd go to Pakistan to visit, and then America and Americana all over the place, like TV, traveling. They loved to travel. In Pakistan, it was not easy to jump in your car and drive around. So we were always traveling around the country, driving, visiting family, friends. So we used to drive from Miami to New York and back, Miami to Texas and back, Miami once to California. My dad eventually got a big van. First it was a station wagon, then it was a big van, then it was a motorhome. My mom instantly became like the Sunday school teacher at the masjid. And later on, my dad even became the president at the masjid. And meanwhile, the national community organization went from the Muslim Student Association to the Muslim Communities Association, or the Islamic Society. And a new youth group was created for it. So my older siblings were part of that first wave of the youth group because we were all in that youth group. And my parents shifted over to being like supporters of the youth group work more. And so they used to organize all the youth activities in the city to gather all the kids and take them to camps and conferences around the country. And we'd get in our, motorhome. We had a big motorhome. We'd go up and down with a caravan of people. Every stop, we'd stop and play football on the side of the street or in the rest area. So I was raised with a mix of like Sunday school, where my mom was principal, and also my family, and Americana, and like reruns and TV shows and pop culture and stuff. Suburban life. My family was quite cultural. On the ride, my mom would put on some Nath tapes, and I'd get bored. My dad would put on some Qawwali, and that'd wake me up, and I liked Qawwali. Really, typical like pro-Pakistan. My mom used to organize the kids in the Pakistan Mela stuff, wave our little Pakistani flags or little Pakistan t-shirts and things. Very cute stuff. But my parents were also remarkably open-minded and very nice, because the early Muslim community in South Florida and in America in general in the West was a hodgepodge. You had all these different ethnic groups and nationalities together. That was not a normal thing in the Muslim world, to have in the same masjid Arabs and Iranians, maybe even Shias, Pakistanis, West Indian Muslims here in South Florida. And then by the late 70s, early 80s, because in the 60s you also had the black nationalist movement known as Nation Islam. It was very prominent. By the late 60s, early 70s, their leader passed away, Elijah Muhammad, and his son, Wardeen Muhammad, after like Malcolm X made a big splash, leaving the movement, converting to Orthodox Islam, and being the most prominent Muslim figure, in the West, in many ways, in America, certainly. Then Elijah Muhammad's son, Wardeen Muhammad, influenced by Malcolm X, who had passed away, who had been assassinated, he converted the whole Nation of Islam to Orthodox Islam in the late 70s. So overnight, the Muslim population doubled. And all these immigrants So in addition to the immigrant masjids in town, whatever Nation of Islam temple was, it became a masjid too. And that happened in South Florida. And my parents, it's 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 actually not remarkable, but it's wonderful. Instantly started working with the Black Muslim community too. So you had Pakistani Muslim community leadership working with Black community, Pakistani / immigrant, because the Arabs, everybody was together at that point. All working together. There used to be big camps together, everyone together. So you'd have Black friends and Pakistani friends and Arab friends, and national conferences going on with this mix. Since then, Muslim community has been a victim of its own success. Obviously, the community got established. Things like hijab are normal now. And the American public has slowly, grudgingly learned about Islam and Muslims over time. And then we've had these different political flare-ups, of course, that have happened around the world, and geopolitical situations that suddenly flash across the headlines and embed themselves on the American pop cultural conference. But then you have this dissonance of like this local Muslim community, nascent community growing, and many of them immigrants, many of them educated in highly professional jobs, so highly specialized jobs, so doctors, engineers. So the non-Muslim community and the white community sees this. They see these two clashing things, and the role of the community to try and communicate itself and about itself and educate these people. For the more religious-minded folks, that's like the concept of dawah and spreading Islam, or at least information about Islam. And Islam, the development of Islam and its own American Muslim identity and Western Muslim identity, which has happened in different ways when you look at the UK versus America versus Australia, or Europe. It's been a very interesting evolution. So I've had a front row seat to a lot of it because of the level of involvement my family had. No, yeah, like I said, so the community became the victim of its own kind of success in that it grew and grew and grew, and then, as happens around the world, even tribalism started happening. So like, it's only natural. Like the Arabs then started maybe split away and make an Arab mosque, and then the West Indians have their West Indian mosque, and then the Pakistanis have a mosque, and the Nigerians have a mosque. So every city in America, you see the same thing, same pattern. There was one MSA in the 60s, often, that then bought a local little house or something, converted to a mosque that everybody went to, and then as time went on, the Shia community got its own, Nigerian community, maybe some infighting caused, or maybe just naturally people started moved to one area or other. And you'll have now between 12 and 13 mosques. This is the number I'm making up, but some cities way more. Chicago, New York, the big ones, hundreds of mosques or dozens. And that's the pattern everywhere. But along the way, things like an MSA, a Muslim Student Association, became a generic term. So it's not necessarily connected to the national organization. Now it's expected. When kids go to high school, they might just naturally just make a club because that's a thing you do. Or when you go to college, you found an MSA. Or there's also that interesting thing about the Muslim, quote unquote, Muslim community, right? It's that it's comprised of many different ethnic and national communities of immigrants that, as you're being a Muslim, you know full and well that these communities have nothing to do with each other largely. Egyptian, they do have something to do with each other, which is Islam and the masjid and the Muslim events. But at the same time, the Egyptian community has its own cultural stuff. The Persian community certainly has its own. The Pakistani community has its own events. They have their own language. They have their own things. So it's not just one thing. It's many things, which is obviously what we struggle to get the West to understand, is that it's not one monolith. But if you are a fan of it, then you realize it's this wonderful honeycomb full of interesting stuff. So that's the background, right? And I end up working in the Muslim community. I studied journalism because within the community growing up for me, and this is when the idea of Muslim identity was really like we wore it on our sleeve and it was really out there and we were pushing it. And these are different times. Pre 9/11 was a different time, Every week at the masjid, you hear people dissing America. This is normal. The imam's going to be like, this country is the devil, it's horrible, look at all this lecherous stuff, and then you can't protect you. The irony of that being, this man's probably an electrical engineer or something. He's went through a visa process to make sure he got away from whatever freaking corruption-filled situation he was in. because many of these people came here to avoid bribery and the state of their post-colonial Muslim countries that had gained freedom from their colonial oppressors in the 50s and 60s, and yet didn't quite gain freedom because they're ruled by a Western elite. And they don't quite have democracy, and their resources are still getting leached by the colonial superpower. And meanwhile, local corruption sprung up. So this is the reality all of our parents went through, and they didn't tell us any of this, right? When they're setting up their little Muslim utopia for us, because that's what they thought. They're like, yes, we got a new chance. You know, leave all the garbage behind. We're going to make a new Muslim community. It's going to be great. And everyone's going to get together. It worked for a little while. It was like, yeah, everyone's getting together. It's good. And the irony, like, we came to America to do it, where you have rights, where you are allowed to do this. And you're even allowed, or back then you were, I don't know anymore, you're allowed to bitch about the government. You're allowed to complain about anything you want. Come and call the whole country a cesspool and just do it. You put your kids in a job and niqabs and anything you want. Big beards. Have them sleep in the masjid with the Tablighi Jamaat for 40. You can do it. It's America. So they came here for religious freedom, like the pilgrims of old, you know, in 1620 on the Mayflower. Only this time it's on PIA or whatever, or Pan Am. So, but the politics of the community were very overseas oriented. The discussions at the masjid, every sermon, every week. The West was definitely a boogeyman. The conspiracy theories flew fast and thick. And they didn't need to be, you didn't need to theorize too much. It was like Rambo is fighting on the side of the Afghans, you know, like the Mujahideen was very openly on the news being supported by America. Reagan saying these are great freedom fighters. So at the masjid, there was largely an overseas focus all the time. And the community members, they came here with the mission, make money, at least the immigrants, make money, establish your family, have a good life, and send money back to Pakistan or to wherever country, go visit. On the American side, they wanted you to go back to go and foment rebellion and at least support America and democracy and capitalism. So it was a win-win. And you go back to Pakistan, you watch bootleg copies of Rambo over there too with your family, and like, oh, they go Rambo, yeah, Commando, oh. So like, it's a really interesting, uniquely American upbringing, with E.T. in the background and Star Wars and all this going on the TV screen. So I was raised with a healthy dose of Muslim community. Who's calling me? Doesn't matter. I was raised with a healthy dose of Muslim community thinking, and I was also raised with a huge amount of pop culture. So my parents were not stringent enough to like try and make us not watch TV. They weren't about that. They watched TV back home. They watched movies. So we'd go watch movies as a family. These days of national television, I guess you have to explain that to a modern audience too, right? What it's like to have three major network TV stations that everybody watches, and movies that everybody goes and watches, you know, or physical paper comic books that you go and you watch. So reruns, the concept of reruns, right? So I'd be home, and after school you come home and you have syndicated television. That was another thing, right? So the goal of a network TV show is to make enough episodes and you can hit syndication, and they can be every day you watch after school. Saturday morning cartoons is another thing we don't have anymore. So it'd be Saturday morning cartoons. So I grew up in this milieu, and pretty typical. We used to go to Disney World, you know, regularly every summer too. So all the typical cartoons, and I'm an '80s kid, so you're talking about G.I. Joe, Transformers, He-Man. You know, these are the things that the male macho, pro-capitalism, pro-America power fantasies. And if you look at the history of that time period, it's really interesting to like the blatant commercialization of that era, where these are just ads for kids for sugar products like cereal and stuff and toys. packaged a 30-minute, really good entertainment because the competition was insane. So I'm watching all this stuff, and I've got my Muslim, stuff going on in my brain, and the mix of, well, and then you had comic books and superheroes, which happened when I was around 11. For me, that happened when a cousin visiting from England, my cousin Ahmad came, and Batman was coming out, and I had watched Batman like reruns of the '60s TV show after school, along with Star Trek: The Next Generation. I think used to air it in syndication, and I'd seen Super Friends probably on TV, but this new Batman movie was coming out with Michael Keaton and Jack Nicholson. So this kid came over from England, and he was a little bit snooty, and he had these big, oversized British comics, and he wouldn't let me touch them. And he had these Batman comics I wouldn't touch. So I went to see the movie, and maybe we got the adaptation, or maybe we didn't at the screening, like the comic book adaptation. But which now I know was illustrated by Jared Ordway, and blah blah blah. Was nerd knowledge. But after they went back, my dad got me a copy of Detective Comics from like a gas station. I guess I was like sullen or something about it, or maybe it was a few weeks past. So I got this comic, and I remember it, and it's amazing. It's like issue 612 or 613. It's Batman's being held by a Hindu deity kind of monster, and it's got 6 arms. So 2 of the arms are holding Batman's arms up here. 2 of them are holding him on the bottom, and the middle arms have an axe, and they're swinging, and they're about to like chop Batman in the middle. I think it's that one. I'm pretty sure it is. So that's my first Batman comic. Loved it. Norm Brayfogle was the artist. Alan Grant was the writer. And perfect. For me, that's like, when you start getting comics, your first creative team is usually like the real one for you. So this is the 1990 team. Got that. Then a few months later, he got me a Superman comic from like a gas station or something. It's the one where Jimmy Olsen's head is like a sphinx, and Superman's above it, and he's like, "Oh my God, it's Jimmy!" And he's been turned. Jimmy's always getting in trouble. So that's a Jerry Ordway drawing as well. So those are my first 2, and then my dad used to get from BJ's or Costco. Both had these packs of 30 comics, and he got me a few of those. So I was up and running now. I got like 60 comics. I'm organizing them under this bed we had upstairs in the upstairs family room kind of area we had in our house there. It was like a canopy bed thing, but the bottom bed had been pulled out so I could hide under there and have these comics laid out in a format. And at that point, it was still 50-50 Marvel DC, because I think the Costco ones were Marvel and the other ones were DC. The DCs were like early Wonder, like George. So this is all post-crisis. So we're talking about 1990. Crisis on Infinite Earth happens in 1986. So it was early issues of George Perez, Wonder Woman, some early Justice Leagues, the Maguire, Giffen, Justice League. You had some John Byrne Superman's in there. And the Marvel pack, you had some West Coast Avengers, some Avengers, and a mix of things. So I loved it. I loved all of it. It was amazing. Amazing time for comics when you think about it. And that's the heyday. Now we realize that was the peak. The 80s and 90s were the peak of paper media comics, right? So these bustling offices in New York, full artists, people coming freelancing. When you know about the medium now, you know the culture that was there. And then in 1990, you had the Image Revolution, shook things up. But this is the era where you had like Spider-Man 1 by McFarlane, X-Men 1 by Jim Lee and Chris Claremont, shortly followed by Death of Superman, Nightfall, the answering salvo by the big 2. Very exciting time. And also this is the height of like the anti-hero comics. So I like my first comic book t-shirt was like a Punisher comic with like 3 bullet holes with like the vinyl blood going down and Frank's in the middle. So now in addition to the Muslim upbringing, you got this comic book influence coming in. And for me, they both dovetailed because the bottom line is save the world, heroism, fight do good deeds and selfless, blah blah blah. When I got to college, one of the big things you'd hear at these camps and conferences was this push that we need Muslims in the media. We need Muslims in the media. Oh, the media, the media. It's like the uncles learned this word media, and they're like, we must say this word all the time. Media, the media is there. They are in the media. They show us that the media. We need the Muslims to go in the media. So it's funny. I'm kind of doing an impersonation of my boss because I then went to work at one of the biggest Muslim, like ISNA. I worked for the biggest Muslim community organization eventually. But first, I studied journalism at University of Miami and print journalism and creative writing. And then near the end of it, 9/11 happened. And all of a sudden, I was like, oh my God, this is it. This is what I was raised to do. I got to do something. I mean, I remember seeing the towers on the TV. I was actually in this room, and I saw them. Is this room or that one? And I see this happening. I go outside, told my mom, stay home. I'm going, and I went to school. And I was like a senior, super senior. I think I had failed a class, so I had to take this extra term or something. But I was taking a graduate level journalism class at the time. I went straight up to my professor, Cici Wakisi was her name, and I said, Cici, I got to report about this. This is like, I know the coverage is always wrong. It's always wrong. Like my whole life, you see these articles in the local paper, and it just doesn't reflect the community. They talk to some random person that they found. I was like, I know the sources. I know the community leaders. And that day I was out. She said she got me in touch with the Herald, their team covering it. And I was feeding them info all day. I was driving around to every press conference and every masjid and getting interviews and stuff. So I got a byline in the 1A coverage in the Miami Herald of September 11th on the local community, like the local reaction side of it. And they called me all day for like a day or two. I was feeding this info. I ran into a reporter from the local alt weekly newspaper in town. He saw what I was doing. I talked to him. He decided to write a piece about me, being this young Muslim journalism student, trying to go and make sure the coverage of the Muslim community is accurate. So that was in that newspaper. They had a big coverage, long form journalism piece, and part of it was called Fawad's Jihad. And I was like, it was about me running around and stuff, because I was also a DJ at the school radio station, so I did like a show about it. About the topic. I usually was just do music and stuff, but that week I brought in Muslim community members and we had to talk and stuff. So obviously it was heightened time. We all remember that. I mean, those of us who were around remember, like, that was a heightened time and an interesting time. And that those few days really did change the nature of the whole world, the Western world at least. You know, we're still taking our shoes off at the airport to this day, and I think forever we're just gonna forever. You will never be able to walk up to the gate again. My dad, we used to he used a classic of like, get there late and run up to the gate with your family and your kids in your hand. You put the cute kid in your hand. Hey, come on, let me in. Like, they would open the door for you and they let you in the plane. And those stupid idiots, Mahmoud Atta and his buddies, ruined it for everybody. We all saw that CCTV footage of them running through and being let in. And now never again, no one ever again can go onto an airplane like that. Yeah. So that happened. And then I helped them cover it. I know the reporters were calling me all day for a day or two. And then the news starts to develop. They realize, okay, where is it? Where did it come from? And it's like watching a football game, you know, like where the ball's in the air and it's going to go through the goalpost, or like it's like an extra. In American football, you have the extra point. So it was like we're all watching the TV. The ball's in there. And like, okay, we don't know where these terrorists could be from. They could be South America. It's like, yeah, South America. So, or it could be the Middle East. No, we don't want the Middle East. Or it could be, okay, looks like it might be Middle Eastern sources. I don't know, left, go left, go left. And then it's like, oh no, it's Pakistan. Oh, it could be Pakistan. No. Okay, northern Afghanistan. It looks like they're northern. They're definitely Muslim terrorists. Like, God damn. Okay. Let's see what's it. So that's the kind of thing it was. So the ball landed on us, kind of. It definitely landed on Pakistan a bit. I mean, it landed in northern Afghanistan, but then, of course, George W. Bush went to Musharraf and put a gun to his head and said, "You're with us or against us, right? So you're with us, right?" So Musharraf has to say yes. And we're on terror. But so the reporters were calling me, and and mind you, I'm from South Florida. And it came out that these guys trained in South Florida, and they went for the mission out of South Florida. So suddenly, then the reporters calling me like, okay, you've told us all about the Muslim community. Now, what do you know about the terrorism? What do you know about terrorism? And I said, I don't know anything about terrorism. What? I don't know anything about terrorism. I don't know anything about this. I was like, oh, okay. And they hung up, and that was it. And that was the biggest reinforcement for me that these attacks had absolutely nothing to do with the Muslim American community. Because I am the Muslim. I mean, I'm not. I'm practically a poster boy for Muslim American community here. I'm got in my blood. Like, I'm raised by it. Community leadership, involved in Muslim my whole life. And when it came down to these attacks, I knew nothing. I had nothing to offer them because all I could tell them about was the Muslim community, not these terrorists, these 13 whatever people who had come, stayed on the fringe, stayed in hotels by themselves. Maybe one or two passed through one West Indian masjid in Broward County a little bit. Not that, didn't talk to anybody, had nothing to do with anybody. Went to a strip club apparently before they went and did this thing. Trained at the Baker Aviation place. So like, very, very telling, very interesting, poignant. The effects on the Muslim community of that event in America were also very interesting too, in that this community that was constantly bitching and complaining about overseas stuff and had an overseas, and to the detriment of its own development. Like the American Muslim community itself didn't develop that much. Our infrastructure, our social services, our community, was so overseas focused. Suddenly, everyone was quiet. Like, don't talk about overseas. Don't say nothing. At the masjid, everyone's like, we love America. America good. Everything fine. Everything good. It's funny. Rami Youssef has a show that just came out called Happy Family USA America #1 something. I actually auditioned for that show to play a bunch of Osama bin Laden impersonators. I just watched the first season. Very interesting. And she tries to like get into the weirdness of that time. And that fits in this topic we're eventually going to talk about, which is Muslim appearances in comics and pop culture. But and I appeared on his show too. I had a part in his show, Rami, small part. So later in my other life, brings us up to basically 9/11, the post 9/11, the change that 9/11 had on the Muslim community and its self-expression. There were efforts and inroads leading up to 9/11 as the Muslim community became more organized and a presence, and developed like a leadership, national kind of Muslim community leadership to address the media and to present, to advocate for itself in the media and the coverage. And it manifested in a lot of the Muslim events in like telling kids, oh, we need Muslims in media. We need Muslims in media. We don't have enough representation and the representation. Because meanwhile, of course, you have how Muslims were represented and how people from the Muslim world in these third world countries are represented, which connects to the larger topic of how the other is treated in Western media and in American media up till then, and specifically these media of like television, film, comics, fiction, literature, etc. It's a topic that goes back hundreds of years, from the birth of all these different genres and styles, because obviously for 1,400 years, almost 1,500 years now, there has been this interaction between Islam and the West, between Muslims and the West. It's not a new thing. Media is not a new thing. I mean, William Shakespeare wrote Othello, in the 1600s, I believe it was, and that's one of the most prominent, Muslim characters you have in fiction. So these things have continued now. These modern media of television and film are, about 100 and now 20 years old, 125 years old. And back when I was growing up, they're about 100 years old. And they have, there are certain popular genres in there, and there are certain tropes and standards. And having foreign bad guys was part of the program. And where are you going to find your foreign bad guys? And during the Cold War, well, during World War II, and after World War II is Russians, Japanese, and before in the buildup too, Russians and Japanese during the Cold War. Germans and Japanese during the Cold War. It was and of course the American Revolution is the British. Then Germans and Japanese during World War II. If you fast forward a lot, and the French as well before the British, the French, the Spaniards. These are all been different others. The Germans and the Japanese, and then the Russians. Now, the Muslims play an interesting role in this history. But when the actual Muslim community starts to develop in the 60s and 70s, which, by the way, was not the first Muslim community in America. There was a wave of Arabs that came with the last wave of European immigration in the 1900s and 1920s. Lebanese, Bosnians, there are neighborhoods. In South Florida, there's a neighborhood in Miami called the Rhodes, and it was a Lebanese community from the 1900s, 20s. That wave got assimilated, and now this was a new wave, this new wave of immigrants. So like I said, the within the community, there was a lot of criticism of America and American, specifically foreign policy at the masjid and in the communities. But it should be taken with a grain of salt. There's also a lot of love too. They love America. So it's not to say that Muslims are all just griping and hating this place. No, they love this place too. So you had a fair amount of patriotism in the Muslim community too. But after 9/11, there is a couple of big waves that come through. Now, before then, there'd be a flashpoint historically, like, say, the Iran hostage crisis. And what would be a big Middle Eastern flare-up before then? The various conflicts between Israel and the Muslim world. Not the Muslim world, I'm sorry, the Arab countries around it. Those were also flare-ups. Probably that earlier wave of immigration had to deal with. And also, of course, there's black nationalism, Malcolm X and stuff. So that's some interaction between white mainstream America and the Muslim community. And you see that reflected in comics as well, by the way. I have those too. But this new Muslim community, it was very affected by 9/11. 9/11 happens. And, but you have to mention, so the immediate buildup before was with the development of terrorism as a phenomenon and as a terminology, right? Because as I understand it, in the 60s, basically the PLO is formed, and at first they start doing these publicity stunts of like hijacking a plane. PLO, which is, by the way, a Marxist, non-religious organization of Palestinians, dramatically hijack a plane, land it, evacuate all of the passengers, and then blow it up on TV. And this starts this thing of the Arab hijacker, right? And what is terrorism? Terrorism is guerrilla warfare tactics against civilian targets for the purpose of like PR stunts. Basically, it's usually when a guerrilla force does not have a standing army, cannot face their opponent in open warfare, so they resort to these guerrilla tactics, and specifically may attack civilian targets. So that's used to be the old definition of terrorism. Although now, apparently, if you just say like you don't like something, you're a terrorist. I don't know. Who knows? But so this really caught the public's imagination and attention as the kind of, I would argue, the prolonged kind of pop cultural flare-up in the imagination of the mind. Yeah, Iranian hostage crisis was like a cap on that. But in the 70s and 80s, or not even a cap, just like one of the high points of that period. But this stereotype of Muslims as hijackers and terrorists and the Arab as a bad guy. So when a bunch of action movies in the 70s and 80s need bad guys now, they start to incorporate the Muslim terrorist, the bad guy, the Arab, right? Um, so when 9/11 happens, by the time 9/11, there's already this nascent Muslim community. It's already speaking out against these stereotypes and arguing that, no, look, we're doctors, we're engineers, we're nerds, we're not hijackers. This is exaggeration. It's not accurate. It's not correct. Um, but meanwhile, we're complaining about American foreign policy and look, America did this bad, that's that bad. But it's kind of conflicted because at the same time, America is on the side of some of these Muslim struggles too, internationally. So, but when 9/11 happens, there's this quietism. There's a hush. Everyone shh. Because, and I was in journalism school, so I had helped cover September 11th attacks locally anyway. Local reaction. And the journalists stopped calling me because they realized I don't know anything about terrorism because it has nothing to do with the Muslim community per se. But then I remember my journalism professors were like, hey, all that stuff we talked about, First Amendment and free speech, like, well, we don't know if that's a thing anymore because the Patriot Act came out, secret evidence, you get disappeared. I've known, we had people here in our local community got disappeared. We had a mom named, we used to call him Santa Claus, mom, because he looked like Santa Claus, this old senile Pakistani man. They disappeared him because he used to say, apparently they got him, somebody entrapped him and got this senile man to say something about America. You couldn't even understand what this guy was saying. He was just, but apparently they got Santa Claus and mom to say something or other. His family's complaining, like, what are you talking about? This man's, he's 80 years old. We run a girls' school in Pakistan. This has nothing to do with terrorism. So there was cases like this, and all around the country, all around the West, suddenly, everyone's suspect. So there was a quietism at the mosque. Now, you no longer talk about overseas issues. We just talk about how good we are, and we love everything. And that's, again, how Ram Yusuf currently has a TV show making fun of this. And then the community started to have more of a, interestingly, this community that I would argue that had kind of an overly overseas focus, started to be quiet about overseas issues. And there was maybe a little more development of the internal, not so much, but there was more America-centric kind of thinking in the community, somewhat. I don't think it's progressed as much as it maybe should have. We have issues of like passing on leadership from the first generation to the second generation. They don't want to do it because they work so hard to build this stuff. But there's a quietism. Now, it's taken a few years for the Muslim community to start asserting itself again. But meanwhile, like, there is this normalization of Muslims. We're there. And also diversity has been a real catch, a real, like, what do you call it? On the rise. It's been a real, like, talking point. And they've liked it. And in fact, currently we're seeing a big reaction to that in America and the West, with this populism and Trump openly vilifying things like DEI, diversity, inclusion initiatives. But that was the norm for this period, this exact same period from the 80s, 90s, used to call it affirmative action, till now. So on TV as well, you had at first the attempt to include Black people and represent them accurately, which was a struggle. Because when you look at TV, you realize it's all told from a white lens. Like all the reruns that I grew up watching were from a white perspective, and so in my mind, I think I'm a white person. Like I have the white perspective in my brain. If you watch nothing but Mr. Ed and My Favorite Martian and Ozzie and Harriet and My Three Sons and Happy Days and it's all white perspective, and Little House on the Prairie and all the westerns and stuff. And
so did you have to tell you're not Gora?
Yeah, I comb my hair in a Hal Jordan kind of way. Like, I like to do that. I do this. I got my little curl. And our cultures have all that, that light skin, dark skin stuff too, as many people do have. It's a global thing anyway. But so, and it goes back, connects to our colonial roots as well. That conflicted relationship with the Namsab and the side. We all still like the Queen of England for some reason. We don't know why. Like, oh yeah, it's our queen. So the diversity and the inclusion, the Muslim community had benefited from. We liked it. We like it. We're part of it, And so part of that sweep, while black people have been getting representation more and more, Hollywood was really on this. Meanwhile, you have to remember, Hollywood is liberal, right? The makers of the media are liberal people, typically, or were. So comic books were a medium created by liberal New York Jews, largely. Open-minded, cool, liberal New York Jews. And TV and movies and stuff, too. Largely. There's other people as well, of course. So these people are typically like anti right-wing stuff, anti-racism, progressive. They're like pro-women's rights. In the more modern times, pro-gay rights, and they want gay representation. That's been a whole. You can track gay representation and how, like, what the landmarks were and how they, from the religious conservative perspective, it's like this evil arc. Like, oh, look, they did this thing, and then they made this one gay character, and then they did another, and now it's norm. Everyone has. Meanwhile, from a pro gay perspective, I remember an issue of Entertainment Weekly. It was like, and look at all the highlights. Here was the first gay executive, and then here's the first appearance, and so it's the same exact stuff, only from one lens. It's like, oh, look, this is how it got evil and got incorporated, and from there it's like, look, this is so great. This is how it got incorporated. But it's the same events, and basically part of this also was Muslims, right? So. And by the way, the dovetailing of Muslim representation, gay representation is a hilarious subject. It's like a subtext. It's hilarious because the lumping together, whether some of the people in the Muslim community wanted it or not, has happened. And we're like, yes, okay, we love everybody, and now I guess true, yes, okay, yes, this is very okay. Because you got the camera in your face and you got a microphone, so you got to say something. I was talking about the Pulse nightclub shooting, which is a very big tragedy, but overnight, the entire Muslim community in America became cool with gay people because they had no choice. Because every Muslim in the country, suddenly, there's a reporter with the microphone in your face, and an uncle Malvi guy is outside. He's like, oh, what? I know, I love the gays. We love everyone. We love America. I don't hate anyone. As any man can touch another man anywhere he wants, is all good. Whatever you want. What do you want me to say? Like, I will say whatever you want me to say. Please leave my masjid. So there's these interesting moments, right, in representation. But overall, it got to a point where, and Indians as well, same thing, in representation of Indians. So throughout the 80s, 90s, and 2000s, Hollywood really like to start putting in, black people are already kind of accomplished, but putting in a gay character in every show, and an Indian character in every show, and a Muslim character, and in more recent times, they love a hijabi. They love a hijabi. They'll put hijabi on anything. Mind you, they don't know what the hell a hijab means half the time. They don't know what you're supposed to do as a Muslim, but they love the look of it. So the representation is going on. The community is a little more quiet, but then advocacy has continued to be a thing, maybe a little less quiet after 9/11, but then as time's gone, there's been renewed efforts. But what's also happened is that the Muslim community has not only matured, it has evolved and continued to evolve. So as have all young people, so the current state of young people and young Muslim people, interestingly, is very different. They are much more liberal, many of them, and some of them much more conservative. There's things that have happened since 9/11. There's a whole ISIS phenomenon that happened in the middle of there too, and recruitment of ISIS and I'd gotten into acting by then, so I kind of missed that whole chapter of it. But I do remember when I was young in the 90s, when the big causes were like Bosnia and Chechnya. Afghanistan had kind of petered out. This is before War on Terror, when Afghanistan was still like a cause that you could talk about and support. Because they were fighting the Russians. Excuse me. It might be common, though, in those days to go to a Muslim conference and hear a young man who just came back from Bosnia. I remember there was one speaker in particular. He was a neurosurgeon and a hafiz, he memorized the Quran, and he was a mujahid. He came back from Bosnia, and he would give talks. His name was Jawad Shah. He was a Canadian, handsome young man. The dream, right? Like, is a doctor and he's a Hafiz, knows the whole Quran, and he went and fought for Muslims out in Bosnia. But this is openly being talked about, celebrated. It's not in secret or anything. It was encouraged. It was okay. You might have somebody at the end of a talk in a masjid coming through, not every day or anything, but we're like saying, "Oh, brother, if you want to come with us, we're going to go fight the jihad somewhere." Occasionally, very rarely, and nobody would really go with them. Maybe one guy would go, like a doctor, and then come back. But these causes of Chechnya stuff, of course, after 9/11, nope, everybody, these charities got shut down, FBI is all over the place, and suddenly people that were openly with the support of the American government supporting overseas, those same groups are suddenly being labeled terrorists or terrorist sympathizers by the same American government that previously had said that these are okay causes. Like, so that's been an interesting thing. And of course, in Afghanistan is where the starkest, most interesting example of that happened, where the Americans literally helped create the situation in the aftermath of during the Russian war and afterward, the Russian invasion and afterward, and then with the advent of the Taliban and how that's developed. And the most recent chapters of that have been very tragic, with America literally signing, after 20 years of fighting them, then signing a peace treaty with them and leaving the Afghan women and the people to their own fate to deal with it. So all of these developments, we all know these all happened, right? And the American Muslim community has been watching. Now, meanwhile, so that's the reality. The Muslim community is fait accompli. We exist. We're here. Hijab exists. Halal food carts are on every single corner in New York City. You go up and get some halal, white sauce, hot sauce, white sauce, red sauce, as they say. And you can Google halal restaurants and a bunch will pop up. You can Google masjid, 20 of them will pop up. And we still are explaining ourselves to the non-Muslims every day because they just don't, they'll bomb the crap out of a Muslim country and then 10 years later come bomb the same Muslim country and then 10 years later bomb it, and they still don't know where Fallujah is, but they'll bomb it every 10 years. The people in Fallujah remember them, and the people in Gaza, they know who Americans are, but we're like, why do they all name Muhammad? Can't they name it something else? Name themselves something else? So this is the America general public you're dealing with usually. Now, in the comic scene, what has happened in the comic scene? The movement toward more representation reached a culmination in about 2012 or 13, at which point 2011 to 13, at which point both Marvel and DC rebooted their entire line, replaced all of their lineup with new diverse versions of their characters, for the most part. Tried to. It was rejected by fans largely, and they went back to their baseline white guys, because when you look at superheroes, they're all the same white guy with the different color hair. Tony Stark and Batman, they all draw on the exactly same square jaws there. If you see a poster of all the heroes from the 40s, they're all just the same white guy with a different outfit. So it reached a point where the creators of comics decided to do this. The critics of it from the right wing would say, "Oh, this was like the ultimate liberalization of these comics," and blah blah blah. They ruined my childhood, they ruined these characters, and blah blah. A lot of race swapping, a lot of gender swapping, a lot of sexual orientation swapping. And along the way, there have been Muslims. So we had really the advent of we've had Muslim superheroes over history, but now more overtly Muslim characters and written by Muslims too. There have been some Muslims trickling into the industry as well. So we have that reality. And now it's a semi-regular occurrence to have a Muslim character come through. And we even have, of course, Kamala Khan, the most prominent, arguably, on Marvel Comics character, Miss Marvel, who had her own TV show even. So there you go. Now, and a movie appearance too. So that's where we're at right now. And the state of comics themselves have declined. Paper comics, we're in the era of Dogman and Captain Underpants now more. And even comic shops have teetered here or there. So it's a medium that's changing. It's largely become a wholesale idea house for Hollywood. Hollywood has kind of bought these studios or vice versa, and they keep the comics as a place to generate ideas for movies and films and TV shows. So how many Muslims are included in that or not, how much advocacy is going on or not, it's still kind of forming. I feel like we're still, even though it's been 20 years since 9/11, we're still kind of like gestating. And I feel like the war in Gaza, not the war, but the genocide on Gaza, has been a turning point. And I really think that this tragic, horrific um, genocidal conflict that Israel has been committing on the Palestinian people this past year is the first time where, at least in America, the Muslim community has finally, after 9/11, been so shaken up, and things have gotten so normalized again that they are again openly talking about overseas issues. So at the masjid again, you're hearing people say and criticize American foreign policy more and more and more, and it's a charge that was led by the youth. The younger people are the ones out there at the front doing it and dragging the elders who are a little more like nervous about it, maybe, to do so. So we're in a very interesting time. And meanwhile, we've had these progresses in representation and some creatives that are Muslims involved here or there in the industry. Those two things have not yet intersected. We don't see the Muslim comic book characters representing the cause, which is inarguably like the universal cause amongst Muslims right now. Everywhere is Palestine and Gaza. That's in every country. It's in every city. Um, you know, it's obvious that the global Muslim community is united for the most part, and many non-Muslims all over the world are united in this call, this appeal to stop this war and to advocate for the Palestinian people. So it's the first prominent Muslim cause on a global level since 9/11's the reaction to the war on terror that was really Western initiated. So it'll be interesting to see how the representation reflects that, or if it does or not, because the comic books have always been a media like film, like TV, that reflects the times it's in. It ends up being a nice time capsule and a cartoony representation, reflection of whatever time period you're in, right? If you're from within one of these communities, be it Chinese Americans or Muslim American, Pakistani Americans, or whatever, Mexicans, Latin American people, you of course hope that you would get some decent three-dimensional representation, accurate representation. That'd be nice. Some dimensionality. It doesn't mean that you'd want like all good guys. You'd want to be able. This is kind of the modern thinking that you'd want everyone, to be good or bad. It gets applied to Star Wars in a weird way, where they're like, "Oh, look, yeah, we want black gay Imperials." I'm like, "Oh, that's not what the Empire kind of like." Okay, I guess. So you want to prove that black people can do genocide too? I guess that's representation. Like, what are we fighting for here? But okay, fine. You got your black Imperials, whatever. Black gay Imperials. I mean, Moff Tarkin is gay now, apparently, or at least according to one story, and it's a whole thing. So, but they reflect the times at hand. Comics do that in particular. It has to do with the nature of comics and the history of comics being this kind of adolescent medium, this originally prepubescent medium, whose readership then grew up and then wanted to do stories that were, as the readership grew up, they wanted more mature stories. But as Alan Moore points out, these characters were still created as adolescent male power fantasies written for children. I mean, now you want to like tell these adult stories, and it's kind of weird. But that is what it's been since the 80s. So how they reflect the Muslim experience and both on the mundane local level, just of real life of representing Muslims, and then also the foreign affairs angle of it and these different foreign events that happen. It's an interesting lens and a telephone game kind of situation, and how accurate is it or isn't it? So that's kind of a meandering overview of some of the topics involved when you talk about the appearance of Muslim characters in comic books. And my personal take and the Muslim, that's more a primer on the Muslim community and the kind of history of the Muslim American community and its arc toward the modern day and representation issues. That's what that is. Now, the subject of the Muslim appearance in comic books is a separate kind of topic that I can start talking about separately now as a piece. Um, but I think that's one section of it. That sets the
Would you
idea.
to set up a separate time to discuss that topic exclusively?
Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I can just do it right now, but or at least start it. But um, I feel like that's a topic that it's more like literary criticism. That topic. This what I just talked about was kind of sociology of whatever.
It's an introduction. So what we can potentially do is save that topic for a second time. We can make a part two or a part.
I mean, I didn't even really talk about comics very much in this one. Like, this is just.
No, it's good in terms of contextualization. I think it was fine.
Not the sexiest thing, but it's okay. Because with the comics topic, for me, the fun of this has been, at the same time, because for me personally, as a comics fan, I mean, I don't know about for you, but like, as you get older reading comic books, you evolve. Just like what I just said, that like the readership of comics grew up and then wanted better stories and then started becoming writing comics, and that's how it got more severe. I feel like that happens with every individual comic book reader. If you stay with it long enough, eventually you become an expert, you become an historian about the subject and about the history of itself, and how deep you dive. Because I'm at the point now where I hang out at comic shops, I walk in, I can identify an artist just by looking at a panel. I'd be like, oh, that's Gil Kane. That's clearly or whatever. That's Jack Kirby. It's easy. Sal Buscema. You look at, so, I mean, I don't know these modern ones. I'm kind of out of touch with a lot of these modern artists. I couldn't tell you what the big classic arcs are. But then you go deeper down the rabbit hole, and I've definitely gone down the rabbit hole. I've researched like from the start of the medium to the present, and the evolution of it from editorial cartoons to big Sunday strips to the comic book eventually, and then to the boom with the superhero boom and all that stuff, and the decline and the up and so like all the arcs. And on top of that, then when I overlay the knowledge I've started to gain about Muslim representation, which is not a real thing, right? Because they're not doing it intentionally. So you're observing something unintentional that's just happening haphazardly. It's only until very recently there's even one could call it some. But I guess that's true of any subject. But those two subjects interacting is kind of cool. So like the development of comics, the development of film, the development of TV and radio as genres. And then when you look at how the Muslim characters or the Muslim, and like we talked about, like what are we even talking about, right? What are we even talking about? There's a few different things. Are you talking about Muslim settings? Are you talking about Muslim side characters? Are you talking about Muslim main characters? Are you talking about Muslim creators writing intentionally Muslim characters? It's all different things. And are you talking about, and even as the research, when I was dividing it up into sections, although since then, what I've just done now in the past 3 weeks, as I finally got the comics out, they were all kind of just crammed in there from that initial period of research where I was really organizing things. And over the years, I just kept doing it, but they just pile up, and so they attempt to catalog at the start, which I was trying to do with word processing. I'm going to talk about like 2003. I didn't keep up, and it's a good idea to categorize them because there are natural categories that evolve. Like there's the adventurer, like your Dagar character. I mean, that's one of the types, there's a superhero, there's a sidekick, there's blah blah blah, and how they connect to pre-existing media, to the pulp fiction and to the pulp fiction, then the Victorian adventure fiction, and then before that to classical literature where they may exist, whether it's an Othello or it's I don't know. The Arabian Nights is a good one, but um, so when I had them categorized, it was cool. But now what I've done is it was useless to me. It was like so big and there's stuff on. So now what I've really done is I've just made, like, organized my collection. I made a section of DC, and it's all alphabetical. And it breaks my heart because, before I had like kind of all the okay, I had all the Indiana Jones style stuff together. Um, but now it's just kind of alphabetical. All the DC stuff, all the indie stuff, all the Marvel stuff. I'm going to use the new CLZ app, which I have my whole collection in CLZ already. I'm going to create a new collection in CLZ just of these. And luckily now that database is growing enough where you actually get synopsises too. You can search by character. But yeah, it would be going character by character. So when I talk about the topic, I like to talk about it first in the question of like what are we talking about? Is it representation? And like I said, it's like the idea of a Muslim really is what we're talking about.
So it actually sounds like a good topic to really get into
Yeah.
our next session.
Yeah. The next one.
However,
yeah, no, this the last 5 minutes has just been me like just thinking out loud about the next session. I haven't really been talking about it. So